have Zoom.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've always used recording to the cloud because it emails it to the admin afterward. And then if you only have a certain amount of time to pull it down, you're done. Don't have to worry about how to transition it or anything. We use it all the time on our church.
Yeah, we only have the 1 gigabyte default. So you can
So
only get one
this
video.
will probably be only about 300 meg anyway, like the typical one. So
Usually like 400 to 500.
depends how long we go.
Under the gig.
Yeah. My church also has a 1 terabyte Dropbox, so they drag it over to Dropbox and then send it out from there, and that's good for 6 months of history anyway. So, and we're recording in a lot higher def than this little camera I got is doing. But I know that Zoom automatically down-reses it substantially.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out what it's actually recording. If it's recording even SD at that level for an hour, only being 300 meg or 400 meg, that's pushing SD quality and not HD 1080. But again, and then again, it doesn't have to. It only needs this big. Everybody else isn't moving, so it's saving on those. Okay, did you have another question, Sanford?
Oh, no.
I have to get to you at some point in time. I'll arrange it, drop off that projector. I just haven't gotten around to it.
You don't necessarily have to drop it off because I do come up your way on occasion. So
Okay.
we could just set up a meet point at some point.
Okay.
We just need to coordinate something. So whenever you're ready, you can, you have my phone number, or you can send me your phone number and we can connect, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Got that down, taken care of. I have, usually I am event driven, and I get these requests that said, something to the effect that the doors at the preschool weren't locked for some reason, and I send out, there's a number of reasons. Each time I've gone and checked it in the last week, it's locked just fine. So I happened to ask all this stuff, and then I asked her, at what time did this person report the door being locked? And she came back, forcefully with their 2 o'clock. Well, when I checked to see the key card system, and when we allow doors to remain open and closed, it was open until 2:10. So there's a good reason why the door did not lock, because it was supposed to be open. Now, that problem should go away now. I don't have to dispatch somebody to go fix the lock that isn't broken. That, and did a fair amount of research in putting together tonight's presentation. Tried to pull a number of sources together, and I tried to put some of my accreditations in the back in the last page of the document in the references. So hopefully that to be sufficient. People won't accuse me of stealing too much. Besides, this is research. So, other questions? Anybody put in the March updates yet?
Yeah.
And you're still here, so obviously it must be okay.
I've never been here. I've never been here.
Is that 22H2?
Yeah.
Okay, I got that in.
I've got 10 and 11.
I'm still on the previous release, and they haven't pushed out the March update yet.
Yeah,
They were trying to on one machine, but on the other machine, it didn't even have a hint.
There is at least one report that the March updates, if you try to do a large transfer to an SSD, perhaps only if you're using a network resource, but maybe also local transfers, you will experience some significant slowing down.
Ooh.
Because they messed up one of the updates. It's the March updates.
No. You said a large file. What does that mean?
Oh, what they were noting was that during transfers, some SSDs, instead of transferring 7 gigabits per second, were down to 1 gigabit per second. That's noticeable.
Yeah, I would think so.
And it has to do with caching.
Did it say anything about what type of SSD, whether it was an M2 or if it was a?
I don't think it mattered very much. It just had to be an SSD that uses caching.
Oh, okay. That's
But
not
anyway, somewhere in here, I do have the reference.
interesting. I did notice that in the period of about a week, we looked like we went through several Zoom updates. I wonder what got broke in the interim ones.
Okay, I have the reference from Extreme Tech as to what the details are. So I'll put that reference into chat if anybody wants to follow up on it.
Okay,
And
thank you.
that is Windows 11,
It affects Windows 11.
right? Does not say anything about 10.
No,
Oh.
10 is okay.
Yeah.
10 is okay. But anyway, the workaround involves using the command line to do the transfer, which is not nice.
Ah,
This one article says it's specifically the AData brand.
No, it's not specific to that.
I'm just saying, this is on overclock, so this is what I'm reading in the Cliff Notes.
Well, AData may be one of the brands affected, but I don't think it depends on your brand. I think it depends on the caching method used.
okay. All right.
Okay, so don't don't try to move large files.
Or do what I always do and wait a week or two for the update to get cleared up.
Yeah, let them fix it first and then update it, and then we'll download it.
Well, there's a lot of us, maybe not a lot, but there's some of us who routinely defer updates for about a week or two.
Okay.
Well, I usually take one of my least used systems and use it as the test bed. Bring it in, see what happens. And it was surprising how small the update was.
Yeah.
I really thought it was going to be a much bigger one with all the cyber security issues, but this one was very, very small, relatively speaking.
Mhm.
Actually, it took longer to get the malware removal tool update down in the end to your system than it took for the cumulative update.
Okay.
Well, maybe they weren't so much bringing more in as to taking more out.
Yeah, they do that.
Script shows up and all of a sudden you have a less stuff. Like, what happened to that app? Like what happens on my phone, all of a sudden one of my apps disappears. Like, okay, why aren't you here anymore? Did you upgrade yourself and forget to put yourself back on my home screen?
Mhm.
Yes.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, we're still soliciting questions. Anybody have any other questions for open forum?
Yeah, I've got something.
Sure, go ahead, Wayne.
I got a couple things on my, I guess it's my router that said that some sort of things was attached to my system. And one of them was AKAMAIEDGE.net. And when you try to go to that itself, on with a browser, it can't go there. And I tried looking it up on the internet, and it has something about it's a world's largest distributed computing platform. And I'm just trying to figure out what the heck's going on.
There was something that came from your router, or how did
Well, the
didn't catch it.
router let me know that various different things are attached to the system. And this was using up like 1 minute's use of time.
Now, the router doesn't normally know what's in your system and what it's using, but it can tell you who's trying to access your router from outside.
Well, maybe it's then not the router, but the modem,
Well,
whatever it is.
the routers do tell you all the devices in your network
right.
attached to it, and that's what it
Right.
sounds like he's saying.
And that's what it was showing up. And then there's another thing, it was aaplimg.com. And that's, seems like it's some sort of an Apple thing.
Well, they should give you an IP address too associated with that device. Did you-
Um,
It'll give you the name and maybe it'll give you an IP address, and you can try the IP address directly to it. Your mileage may vary.
yeah, I think it did have but it was a weird address. It wasn't on my system.
Well, if it's not on your system and it's not in your network, then it shouldn't be on your side of the router, but on the other side of the router somehow, and it wouldn't be attached to your router then. Unless somebody on your network has a VPN and can present a different set of addresses to be played on the local net.
Yeah, my phone's got a VPN. So does my iPad.
Well, if they VPN and they're also connected to your local network at the same time, that would be the only things I could show that may possibly allow something. And that usually means the VPN is misconfigured to allow somebody to pass through that you didn't intend.
Okay, well, I don't know. It's not showing up now.
Well, if you turn off your phone and turn off your iPad and go look at it again, and it disappears, then you have a pretty good idea if somebody's sneaking through the VPN, time to go check the permissions on the VPN and how it's set up.
Okay, here's the thing. It's a 47.88.22.185. Says it's used 1 hour's worth of time.
Well, that's not on your local net. Okay, and like I said, if you could track down everything, like start powering your devices down and see when it disappears, then you might get an idea if one of your devices is compromised.
You got 20 some odd things on there.
That,
Yeah,
That's all.
that's all.
And there's another one, 58 minutes, 55 minutes, 59 minutes, 47.105.81.206.
What kind of router do you have?
I've got a Motorola. Well, it's a combo router and modem.
Okay,
And this is on my app that I have for my Motorola old modem. And it
Okay.
shows there's the time spent in it on the network usage. And it's got all these different devices. You know, my Xfinity home. Well, I've got Xfinity security, and I've got a sleep number bed. I've got a,
What? Bed? Your bed is on a router?
yeah. I can access the bed, on it and adjust it up and down.
Oh, my God. You need a Bluetooth app to adjust your bed? What
Yeah,
has the world come to? Does it make it now? Does it make the bed too?
yeah,
it doesn't
No.
make the bed. It's one of these beds that's a sleep number bed. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, okay.
It's adjustable, the head goes up and the foot you can move up and down. When my wife's snoring, I can reach over and raise her head on hers, and it'll stop you from snoring.
I thought an elbow
Hey,
works
Wayne,
pretty good.
Hey,
Doesn't
Wayne,
an elbow work?
hey, Wayne, is this one of those? A few years back, I looked into an adjustable bed, and they told me, I can't remember what brand, but they said that they used to have remote controls, but then they didn't sell the remote control with the bed anymore because they had an app you could put on your phone. Is that what you have? There's no remote control, it's just the app?
No, I've got a controller that's on the nightstand.
So it's an external controller that offers the Bluetooth interface.
Yeah, the controller that I have on the bed runs on Bluetooth.
So
But
you're dead asleep and you got to grab your phone to adjust the bed and turn on the blue light on there?
no.
You have a manual connection too.
Yeah, but this also it tracks your, when you're in the bed, and not in the bed. It tracks your breathing rate, and it also tracks your heart rate.
Okay, Briden's gonna get rid of TikTok and then your bed next, Wayne.
Anyway,
All right, so do you have an MT8733 or similar?
I'm sorry, what now was that now?
Your model number of your Motorola modem.
Oh, here, hang on. Let's see, yeah, it's an where's it? Come on. It's a Motorola MG8702.
Okay, thank you. All right, Motorola MG8702 app.
Right now, I've got 31 devices that are hooked to it.
Okay. Devices.
And all of them are talking to China.
Probably. Well, my wife's got an iPad there. I've got my iPhone. I've got an iPad. We've got several computers. We got 3 printers. I've got 3 garage door openers.
Interesting. Okay, well, I'll have to look at it offline, but normally the thing with connected devices are only the devices on your end. I'm not sure if it is also showing you what they're connected to at the other end or not.
No, it's not. Not on this.
Well, if it's got a 47 dot something address, that's not local to your subnet, because that's a Class A subnet address, which is only reserved for major companies.
Well, I think that's what these 2 different things are. This AKA MEIEDGE and the AAPLIMG.com. I think that's what those are.
Did you
Well,
try?
send a screenshot of it and to my email, and then I can take a look at it,
Oh, okay.
see if I can determine it.
Wayne, you gave us names that were actually blah, blah, blah.com. Did you try Googling that name?
Yeah, the AKA MAIEDGE.net. I Googled it,
And
it's something that says it's one of the world's largest distributed computing platforms.
okay, but
Akamai is used by ad servers. It's used by content servers. It's really very generic.
Yeah,
It's just a platform, in other words.
right.
Well, it's a platform cache resolver for many web pages.
Right. And
So
I think the other one, this AAPLIMG.com, is a similar type of thing. Although I
If
think
anybody has an Apple device, it would be communicating with an Apple server.
yeah, and I think that's what that is.
And that sounds like an Apple address.
Yeah. And that's why these addresses I was telling you, the 47 and the 48, whatever it was, are not part of my network.
well, they may not be part of your network, but somehow the application that you're using to display them is getting confused, thinking that they're local here, when in fact
Yeah.
they're remote.
Right.
And it's probably a display issue with that app rather than those actually being on your net, because even if I did have that IP address on your local net, you couldn't talk to it. Because unless
Yeah.
there's something providing you a routing function between you and that network, the packets will go back and forth by each other and they will ignore each other.
Yeah.
So if I want to put like a different subnet up, and I've done this before, I have to add manual routing commands inside one of my Windows machines to say, the way you get to this is to go through this address, and usually it's my local IP address on the port. And
Yeah.
then I can talk to that entity that I normally can't talk to.
But when I put these things into my browser, it can't get to it. Because they're not a valid address on, from the browser.
No, you wouldn't be able to do that because the devices communicate directly with servers in ways that your
They may
browser
not even
can't.
be a exposed interface that you can connect to with the browser.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think we got Bob just started getting hung up here.
What?
He froze.
No, you froze.
No,
Ed, you are a little on the frozen side. The image.
Yeah, I can see
Yeah.
the ice.
Wave your hands, Ed.
see, he's
Yeah, he's frozen.
Yeah, he froze
froze up.
Yeah,
Uh-oh.
Ed froze.
Oh,
Ah. That's probably because he's recording to the cloud. He's using up his bandwidth.
Could be. Well, we'll see if we get him back.
wow.
Ah,
Look.
lost.
I think he passed away. Let's see if he resurrects himself.
Right.
What he did was he preserved the meeting by handing off the host function to Sid
Yeah.
so that he doesn't have to restart the meeting. And then we'll see if he can get himself restarted. Meanwhile, we can continue with the open forum.
Yeah, because it says it's still recording.
Yeah. It, as long as he managed to pass it off to
Yeah.
a co-host, which is something that we need to do in our meetings. We don't set up a co-host normally. And this is one of the cases where without a co-host, his video would end.
This isn't, this wasn't a handing off of co-host, it was a handing off of host.
Well, you can only do that if somebody's designated as a co-host to start with.
Oh, all right.
So at the moment, yes, you're right. We can continue on even though he's not there. If somebody else has something else to discuss, because
Yeah, Sid is listed as host in the participants.
and
Yeah.
right
All
now,
of a sudden, I feel like Al Haig here.
right now we have probably him taking and restarting his computer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no doubt. No doubt about it. Maybe the computer, maybe the modem. Maybe his modem has an intruder.
And yeah, maybe Wayne, your mysteries are now affecting
I'm sorry, I came in late and when I did sign on, I noticed it said I had a very narrow width, but now that's disappeared. So I don't know what's going on.
well, I get that message now and then. It's just a case where the internet is not a constant speed.
Yeah.
Like a
Oh, I
direct
know.
wire's voltage. It's a case where it's constantly fluctuating.
Well, I'm quite a ways from my router too. So I'm upstairs and the router's in the basement. So
Oh, are you
What?
doing Wi-Fi?
yeah.
That's the problem.
Now
What?
now we know why you're attending tonight's meeting.
Yeah.
You gotta understand it's radio waves and
Oh, I
anything
know.
interfere with radio, therefore
I know.
you get fluctuation of coverage.
Right.
And
So why
band.
do
still
you have it in the
works.
basement?
Pardon?
Why do you have it in the basement if you know that's a bad place for it?
Because that's where everything comes in.
Yeah, I know of another guy that's in the south suburbs from me that also in his house, all the internet comes in the basement, but he and his wife's bedroom is clear at the top of the house. And he
Yep.
was having nightmares with Wi-Fi coverage as a result. And I told him he had to put in somewhere in the middle of the house a repeater or access point to take the signal from the basement and boost it for up in the upper part of the house.
Is yours, Wayne, is yours fiber optic or coax that's coming in?
It's, well, it's just a wire. It's not fiber.
Okay, so couldn't you run a coax cable up to upstairs?
Should.
I do have one up here. I'm just trying to get it plugged in now.
Oh, but I meant have your main one go upstairs.
No,
Nah,
okay. Now I'm on, it should be on the, well, I guess I just plugged
It
it in.
doesn't turn over immediately. It takes about a
Yeah.
minute.
Says unidentified network, no internet access.
May not be
Now it's
totally
connected.
set up for Ethernet, but here's the thing. If you got a coaxial cable that goes down to the basement to the router that's in the basement, you can put a switch, a 5 port switch on that wire and hook up 4 devices.
That's what I have up in my office here right now. I just plugged it in. I've got a, you know, a switch up here because my desktop is up here in my office and it's hardwired to the modem in the basement.
Yeah, for me and my house, my router modem is clear on the other side of the house, but I wired the house somewhat with Ethernet, and I'm hooked through Ethernet, and I have switches that are allowing multiple devices Ethernet access.
I ran the wire up through the ductwork, my ductwork that comes up from the basement.
That's one option. Sometimes your cold air returns are also an option for doing that. Oh, you decided to come back. No, Ed, no
I'm
volume.
not, I'm unmuted. For some reason, I could not get to zoom.us.
Wow.
Like I lost a router between me and there. I did a trace route and it got hung up halfway through.
Wow.
So somebody in Comcast land bounced something they shouldn't have. Sorry about that.
Uh-oh.
Well, I checked all of my stuff locally. It's like, this is okay, this is okay, this is okay. I'm able to ping Google just fine. So I think it's not, you know, doing the right thing here, folks.
Well,
And then I started trying to ping zoom.us and it failed. Let's see.
Wow.
Can you normally do ping.zoom.us? I didn't check. Yeah, the same address too, 70.114.52.2. So I did a trace route and then a ping, and neither one of those functioned. Have not restarted my router or my cable modem. Did power cycle my computer just in case, but I think it was just timing wise.
So Ed, are you going to have to restart your recording?
I think my recording said it was already recording, but I'm going to, it says it's still going.
it's
So
still,
it,
Yeah.
it
yeah.
was, he set it up to the cloud and somebody else was still, Sid was still the host, so it still kept going.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So at least we had a host, so it didn't drop everybody else.
No,
But-
the meeting went on. The meeting went on.
The meeting went on. Just was
And
my
I felt like
portion
Al
of the
Haig.
universe. Yes. Well, just in case this thing fails again, as if there's no other questions, I will at least start my presentation and then I can send it to the rest of you as well. I think I'll do that right away.
Okay.
Yes, chat to everyone. Let's find this. Let's see, I want to. There, okay. No, where is it? Format, screenshot. For some reason, they've changed something here. All right.
Sid's got a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Sid.
I use a couple different VPNs. One of them Surfshark.
Uh-huh.
Surfshark, my subscription's up in about 10 days. So I went to turn off auto renewal. They don't make it easy to turn off auto renewal.
Most
don't
places
want you
don't.
to
I
do
mean, no matter where you, if you tried to turn off your automatic charge card for Comcast, I defy you to do that.
So you have to go on live chat and they give you a link to a web page to turn off auto renewal, which that same web page could have just as easily been a link under your account in the first place.
But
You
that
click
would
on the
be,
link, which takes you to one of their pages, and you click on turn off auto renew. And it says, are you really sure you want to do this? You will lose your protection. And you click yes, and it takes you to another page that says, you may not want to do this because you will lose protection, and it reverses the question. So no is yes. So
You sure you
have to
haven't
hit
seen this
the
before on the Chicago Tribune site?
Yeah, so so you have to hit the opposite, otherwise it means that you want to keep the auto renew. So you hit that button, it takes you to another page, which says you get one more chance here before turning off auto renewal. You probably don't want to do this. And you click that, and it grudgingly turns off auto renewal. The interface then of the VPN changes color and puts big warnings at the top of itself saying auto renewal is off. You're in trouble. Auto renewal is off. And it pops up with reminders every day. Auto renewal is off. And they send you emails. Auto renewal is off. Well,
Danger, Will
point
Robinson, warning, warning.
I know. So if you go to Surfshark's main page, you can get 2 years plus 3 months. Why they do the plus 3 months, don't ask, for $60. If you let it auto renew, it's $87 for 1 year. Why do I want to auto renew for $87 for 1 year versus letting it end and then renewing for less for 2 years, 3 months?
That would be it right there.
And they didn't offer me as part of that clicking buttons, do you want to pay this amount instead? No, they didn't do that. They want you to
had
give
the,
them the full amount.
I had a similar experience, except it was with Comcast Business Voice Edge. So when you have Business Voice Edge and Business Internet, they're like two companies almost. You bought them from the same company. However, the one goes through the regular Comcast business webpage. The other one, you got to change to the other account, and then you got to click billing, and that's the wrong of the three accounts that are there because one of them doesn't really exist. You got to go back and click the other one. It sends you to a whole different subsystem, a different web address, and you have to have a new password and a new login there, and that just manages your billing for Comcast Business Voice Edge. Once you've done that, you set up your credit card and your auto pay, and it's kind of lame. If you were to set up and pay something, and then you go in and set, oh, I want to automatically deduct this stuff in the future, and here's my limit for this. If that limit is below the amount you just triggered the payment for, it bounces the payment. And on top of it, I had a credit card associated with this after we finally did get auto pay working that was going to expire January 31st. What happened early January? They deleted my auto pay because, oh, the card's going to expire. So I'll just delete your auto pay. Not like letting me go in and update the expiration date because that's the only thing that changed. So I went in and updated the expiration date and I expected everything to be fine. And then a couple of days ago, I started getting calls from Comcast accounts payable that puts me on hold, calls me and puts me on hold. So I answer the phone and I get no answer for like 10 minutes. I hang up, I try and call them back. Finally, I figured out what the problem was, triggered a payment, and then called them back on their helpline and said, okay, reverse the late fee. It's not my fault. You're the ones that dropped my auto pay, not me. So they reversed that. And today I get another call. After I paid this 2 days ago, I get another call from a Comcast accounts payable that says, pull up my records, please. you not see the payment that has already been put on this account? Oh, yes.
Well, it can take
crazy.
a couple of days, a couple of business days for them to realize throughout their entire system that you.
Right.
Yeah, but that they should have taken like turn off the dogs of war. Quit calling him. Otherwise, we're going to get a do not call violation. Oh, but you
Well,
have a relationship with them. I know that, Mike.
yeah, it can be a situation where it takes a little while for the correction of the problem to filter through the system.
Well, she had no idea I had already paid
That's what I
until
mean.
she actually pulled it up. Like, oh, you've already paid. Yes, Ed.
I mean, the worst one I had was Sam's Club. I turned off the auto renew. They renewed anyway 3 months after it expired. I called the credit card and I said, why am I being charged for renewal for something that expired 3 months ago and didn't have auto pay turned on? They said, we don't know. You got to call them. Sam's Club said, you got to call the credit card company. Finally, they said, we'll try to correct it, but we can't guarantee we can stop the payment. And I said, well, I didn't authorize it, so consider it disputed. It took them 8 months before they finally sent me a message saying, we've reversed that charge. Fortunately, once you dispute it, you don't have to pay it in advance. But 8 months later, they finally said, we've reversed that charge for something that I hadn't renewed, and it was 3 months past the end date anyway.
Wow.
Insane. The
So all of
dumbest
you
one
people
is,
in Illinois have received your additional Facebook check?
Yeah,
I never signed up. I did get my Six Flags check though.
Oh, that's even better, probably.
Because they were doing biometric. But what they're doing is sending a check every December for 5 years to give you that
Wow.
amount back. So you get these $6 and $7 checks every December for 5 years to get it back. And you have 90 days to cash that check after you get it with that wonderful $6 for 5 years. They're sending that out, which is kind of hilarious. I started to say the other one that's always was awful was Sirius XM. You cannot cancel
Oh, yeah.
online.
no,
There's no
no,
way in the world to do it with Sirius
No.
XM.
no.
Every 6 months for 4 years, it was the same thing. Call to cancel because then they offer you a better deal.
Right.
Uh-huh.
They couldn't just offer you the deal and make it
No.
easy.
Sounds
Every
just like
6
the
months.
Tribune. Oh, but we don't want to see you go. How about if I give it to you for $40 per year?
My favorite was the Washington Post. They wanted to renew for $115 or so. I clicked cancel. It came up and said, we can offer you $60 a year. How about that? Do you want to renew? I said no. It came up. It said, how about $10 for a year? Ooh. And I said yes to that one. It's like, it's a declining thing we're going to offer you.
Keep on until you get the best price. I was trying to remember what somebody was paying for the Daily Herald or something on Next Door Neighbor. Yeah, they had a subscription that was going to renew for a year, and they had some ungodly price that was coming through. I think it was like
Yeah,
hold on.
I got a renewal 1 year from them for $415
Yeah, that's the right
a
number.
year.
And I figured, what are you paying for?
$415.
Which columnist are you paying for?
Yeah, I mean, $415 for a year of the Daily Herald. And I called and said, are you out of your freaking mind? There's no way I'm paying $415 for a year of the Daily Herald. And they said, well, our rates have gone up. And I said, well, they haven't gone up that much, I don't think. I appreciate cost. And this was before the latest inflation bout. This was a couple of years ago.
How about
And
if
it
I
was-
promise to recycle my paper to you so you can reprint it and send it back to me?
Well, There's a little secret with the Daily Herald. They have guys who do charity stuff. And they do the subscriptions at a lower rate, and part of it goes to charity. So you
Ah.
cancel, within about 3-4 days, the charity person calls you and says, I can offer you a year at $110, and part of your money's going to our charity. And I said, that's a lot better than $415. I like that. And not only that, if you do it through the Daily Herald, they have a scam that certain issues are considered special issues.
Oh, just like
are
the
more
Tribune did,
expensive.
but you can refuse those.
Yeah, they have 6 or 7 a year, and they're like $6 issues.
Yeah, so I think it's up to $9.99 or something like that for the Tribune extra articles or something like that. No, I'm not paying for it. Cancel my subscription. Okay, we'll take it off.
Just go with the straight digital version and it's like dirt cheap.
Well,
Yeah.
you get the digital edition anyway. It's just that I like to have the paper in my hand sometimes in the morning rather than staring at a screen, because the thing that goes page to page in the Tribune sometimes gets hung up on a phone. Like you can't get to one page unless you restart the whole thing and clear the cache and then go back and go through the advertisement and then wait for the page to render and it shows up on the screen. Usually it's one with a lot of content on it.
Yeah, yeah.
But I've had ones
Yeah.
that got stuck where I couldn't get to the page I wanted. And I even tried to do it on a computer and it was a defective PDF file because it was missing that page.
Yeah, I got an email from the Tribune offering unlimited online for $6 a year.
Oh, go
For a
for it.
year. I felt bad. I got cheated. I paid $10 for a year. for unlimited online. And
The
I'm going,
$4
"Look,
went to
I'm
charity.
doing-" It's like
The
I get
Tribune
the New
charities.
York- Well, it's like I get the New York Times. It's $1 a week. Now, all I wanted to do was pay a year at a time. They will not do that. They bill $4 every 4 weeks. It's the only way they know how to do it.
We
It's
might go into
$4.
business before
And they've
then.
been doing this for 5 years now, so far back that it's on an educational account that I don't even have anymore. There's no way to change it because that email address doesn't even live anymore.
Wow.
It's $4 every 4 weeks, and it's stayed that way for the past 5 years.
Wow, that's really something. Well, if I could get all of them that way. I mean, I do get some of my magazines electronically, but there are certain ones that I prefer to have in paper. And sometimes it's better when I want to read something and look at it in a little bit more detail and I don't feel like staring at the screen or digging out my other set of stronger glasses so I can read what's on the screen after I've been on it all day. Yeah.
Has anybody here tried Magster?
Magnifying glass of some sort?
No, Magster is back. We're still on subscriptions. Magster is all the magazines and papers for one rate annual.
Wow.
They're doing a deal right now for $50 for a year. And you have like 20 to 700, some large number of magazines and papers.
Whoa.
There's 2 tricks to it. One, the papers are all European papers. There aren't any American ones in there. And of the 2,700, about 1,800 of them are porn magazines. I'm serious. And you go down the list and it's all in one continuous list. There's no way to skip to just the stuff. You can go by language, show only the English language stuff, but you can't get past the porn stuff, which goes on for page after page after page on their, when you want to see what is offered. The one thing they offer that makes it somewhat of a deal is the Atlantic. The Atlantic is owned by the ex-wife of Bezos. And all of a sudden,
Businesses.
they quintupled their subscription rates
Hmm.
and they went off of any other guys like Discount Magazine and those guys that used to offer them can't offer them anymore. So it's their subscription rate's like $60 a year now.
Wow. Okay.
if you want access to them. And they have some good writing, but my Lord, you'd think Bezos's wife could afford to subsidize it a bit.
Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, yeah. And of
Okay.
course, most of you know that Libby now has most of the magazines available. Libby is the Illinois Library stuff. If you have a library account at almost anybody, you can use Libby. And they have virtually every magazine except the Atlantic, which doesn't allow it to libraries.
Do you only browse online or do you download or what?
You can download into the Libby app. And magazines don't count towards your max number of checkouts either.
Okay.
So there are certain magazines like Sound and Vision that I like, and I can check that out in Libby and just read it on the tablet.
Mhm.
And it works pretty well for that, and it costs nothing. I don't know about your library. Schaumburg Library has free subscriptions to the Wall Street Journal. The only catch is 3 days at a time. You check out a 3-day
Oh,
unlimited, and then when that's up, you can keep checking it out. There's no limit on it, but it's 3 days at a time. And the New York Times, they do the same thing.
okay. All right. Put this down. All right. Tim, were you taking the attendance for this, or do I have to do something special?
So far you got 13, but
Okay.
dropped out. I don't know if they came back in or not.
Okay, all right. Just thought I'd check, so I don't have to worry about keeping track of those things.
Well, that's so far. I mean, Terry Moy just came in, so you could increase that every time allow somebody in.
Okay, well, I joined twice, so that's 2.
Yeah, I forgot about that. So you got 14.
Yeah, yes, Sid.
Just to throw out there, I went to last month's Uniforum meeting. It was on quantum computing. And the guy who presented did an incredible presentation on quantum. And I'm mentioning it because it's available on their YouTube channel. The whole presentation is up on their YouTube channel.
Okay,
What's weird is you can't save it because they classified it as a kid thing, and YouTube doesn't allow kid things to be saved. It's
oh,
turned off, which is really weird that it's classified as a kid thing. However, you can copy the link, which I ended up emailing myself. But if you go to the Uniforum on YouTube, that presentation is up there. And he did a really good hour-long presentation on quantum computing.
quantum computing. Does it give you the answer before you ask it?
Yeah.
One of his points, which somebody in the audience was arguing nonstop, and they finally muted the guy, he said there is currently no application anywhere that's any better on quantum than on standard computers. He said they don't exist yet.
That is
In 10
correct.
years, you might see them, but right now, there is not one thing you can do on quantum that you can't do equally or better on current computing. And this guy was,
A lot of that is because nobody knows how to program quantum computers yet. Nobody knows how to program using qubits.
yeah, that's what
It's
he
the-
was saying. He said in 10 years, it'll probably change, but right now,
Yeah.
there's nothing that's better on quantum that you can't do
Well,
on others.
Since quantum can transverse space and time, I'm waiting for myself in the future to send me information on how to do that.
The other thing he mentioned was one of the biggest concerns with quantum is breaking encryptions. And
Yep.
evidently, there are certain algorithms that quantum can't deal with.
There are some that it can't deal with yet, but the problem
He
is
was
it
saying,
can break almost all currently existing quantum computing algorithms.
Yeah, but he was mentioning there's already, new blockchains that have the coding in them that will resist quantum ability to, and he was saying ever. He was saying that because of these algorithms, they pretty much take what quantum is capable of doing, and they can't break these particular algorithms because of the way they work. I didn't understand that. You might want to watch the video and see if you do. But he was saying, for instance, on some of the cyber currencies, they're already splitting them onto new chains that have these algorithms in them.
By any
never-
chance, would it be type of passwords that changed based on time?
Again, I didn't understand what he was saying on it. Feel free to watch it. But his point were with these specific algorithms, quantum will never be able to deal with in any reasonable method. I don't know how that would work, and I don't understand it, but somebody else may actually get that.
Yeah,
I just
well,
thought it was
I
fascinating.
mean, I've worked on systems where the password always changed. It wasn't kept in a file, but the password was basically, if you knew when the machine was, what time the machine was, and usually it displayed it on the screen and the date, you could calculate what the password should be and then use that, and that would let you in. So that's
Yeah.
not a pre-known or shared key or something. It's knowing how the algorithm works, and that's kind of hard to break because it always changed minute by minute.
Yeah, and you have things like YubiKey that change every few seconds.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see. I will go ahead and share this screen and see whether or not everyone can see it. Okay. Anyone have a problem with it? I hope not.
Looks good.
Okay. Says participants can now see your presentation. Okay. So the age-old question, Wi-Fi coverage, is it a practice or is it magic? Okay. Because when you look at Wi-Fi coverage in your house, rarely do people plan for Wi-Fi coverage in their house. They usually are at the mercy of wherever Comcast decides to run the cable in. Yeah. So wherever they cabled it, that's where it got put. Yeah.
We got an echo.
I'm going to have to mute somebody here. Everybody mute who's not talking. How's that? There, I'm talking and everyone else is muted. Okay, that should be better. So when you purchase or rent a modem router and you place it close to the installation point for your cable or network entry, if you have fiber, and you just leave it there. And that's most likely the least desirable location for putting a wireless access point or router, because you may not have all of your computers and or portable devices within range of that access point. The other thing you might not take into account is other users of Wi-Fi and shared wireless spectrum from people outside your house. If you're in an apartment of some sort or a condominium, or you're living in a city lot and the guy is 10 feet across the alleyway from you and he's got a Wi-Fi unit, he may just be blasting right into your house as well. So what's wrong with this just plug and play? Well, Comcast wireless routers, when they first configured themselves, look for a channel of least resistance and hop to it, and that's where they'll park your system. They have some rules behind it, but they will go ahead and do that. And you have both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz spectrums to deal with. Comcast typically deploys a 160 megahertz wideband AX on the 5 gigahertz, trying to use up most of the 5 gigahertz band so that you have ultimate speed, because you can't get those speeds on 2.4, so that they can claim they deliver these super speeds, these 2 gigabit per second throughput downloads. But most of that requires a pretty much ideal situation. And you usually can't get that throughout your entire house. And depending on how close your neighbors live and what they have deployed, should also influence your decision. So, a little bit of history here. basically on 2.4 gigahertz, there are 11 channels we can use in the US, 14 channels can be used in other portions of the world. And if you had the 14 channel situation, you could use channels, it shows here 1, 6, 11, and 14. There is some overlap between 11 and 14 here that's not, that there's no gap between, you can see they touch. They actually overlap slightly. And we're not allowed to use 12, 13, or 14 at all in the US. So we only have 3 non-overlapping channels if we're using standard 802.11b or G. Same thing with the GN on 20 megahertz wide channels. You only have 3 channels you can use, either 1, 6, and 11, or 1, 4, 7, and 1, 4, 7, and 11 can also be used with a 10% overlap. I think I mentioned that later on. When they use without 12 and 13, this is where they show 1, 6, and 11. The problem with using channel 11, though, in most of these places is that it fails to take into account the fact that a microwave oven operates on 2450 megahertz, because that's the best frequency to boil water with. Well, 2450 happens to be exactly on top of channel 10, which is in the middle of this channel 11. So if there's any sort of leakage on this 1,400 watt device between you and your access point, it can interfere with your communication. You may see things drop out. And then there's, if they do 40 megahertz wide, that chews up most of the band. Okay, so in America, we have 11 channels separated by 5 megahertz, and the smallest Wi-Fi channel is 20 megahertz wide. So 1, 6, and 11, and if you can tolerate the 10% retransmit, or you can have, when you have more than one access point, you can place your devices so that 1 is next to 7, 4 is next to 11, and the 4 and 7 and 7 and 11 don't touch each other. You know, and you can try and arrange it so that they have as least possible of interaction, then you win. If you use the 40 megahertz wide channels, that uses 2/3. The problem of using anything more than 20 megahertz, you can run into problem with other devices that are using your band, especially if you have any really old 802.11b devices present that are trying to communicate with your same SSID, and it's allowing them to associate to it. If they do, because you have left it on BGN instead of just setting it to GN, then once he's connected, whether or not he's transmitting, he can interfere with anybody else trying to use the band because he can't understand anything newer than 802.11b. He can understand the header present if it's transmitted at 2 megahertz, is how fast, megabits per second is how fast the header is transmitted, but then it re-encodes the rest of the packet for 5.5 or 11 on B, or it can be 6 through 54 on 802.11g, or it can be up to 66 megabits per second using 802.11n. All of those guys lose if the 802.11b device decides to jump up and transmit and says, hey, who am I? And does a DHCP request. Boom, just blew you out of the water while you're transmitting that large block in. So kind of not a good thing to ever have 802.11b devices that can interfere. What I have found is if you do need to have a legacy 802.11b device, I set up a separate access point for it on a channel that is removed from the ones I'm trying to use and let it associate there, and then it ignores everybody else. And if you can use it 5 gigahertz or 6 gigahertz. With 802.11a, N, AC, or AX, you can use 5 gigahertz. AC does not use 2.4. AX can use 2.4, but again, because of the interference and the fact that 2.4 gigahertz travels farther with the same power level, it can interfere more readily with other devices. That 5 gigahertz band in America is channels approximately 36 to 165, which used to have a big gaping hole in the middle of it with the Uni 1, 2, and 3 bands. but the ones that they re-added back in are subject to what's called radar avoidance. Okay, the radar avoidance channels mean that the access point has to be conformed to DFS, and if it sees radar, so it's listening specifically to see if it sees what appears to be a radar signal. If it sees radar, it communicates to any devices that are associated with it to change channel and tells them what channel to go to. And if your device does not support radar avoidance, you're not allowed to use those bands. The original channels were 36 through 48 and 149 through 163, and each one of those could have been used by an individual 20 megahertz wide signal, and you would have been fine with it. When you use channel bonding, it can use 2 or 4 of those channels. There is no 3-channel bonding to be able to transmit faster or more robustly. The high order channels were Uni 3 band, the 149 through 163, and those used to allow up to 1 watt EIRP. But most of the time that is only allowed when you are outside antenna, not where somebody can look into the antenna, because it could cause things like cataracts. Okay, all right. On the 6 gigahertz channels, they finally got smart and started renumbering them. So they started 159 using 4 channels at a step. So each one is a 20 megahertz channel, and they're located up in the 6 gigahertz band. And you have to be aware that some of them are only identified as LPI, low power indoors, or ultra low power indoors. So you get to the 802.11n, AX, and AC. 802.11n supported MIMO, multiple in, multiple out. Hold on, stay there. It allowed modes of what N by N, where N is the transmitters, M is the receiver. So 1 by 1, 2 by 2, 3 by 3, or even 4 by 4. Devices which are battery operated low power are typically only 1 by 1. So they are automatically fixed and they will never go 2 gigabits per second. With 20 megahertz channels, a 1 by 1 tops out at 72 megabits per second. Channel bonding at 40 megahertz channels, there's a typo there, gives you up to 150 megabits per second. If you can use 2 transmitters, 2 receivers at 20 megahertz, you get 144 and 40 megahertz at 300 megabits per second. Right now, I think I'm connected. I have 2 by 2 receiver. The transmitter is 4 by 4. So I'm somewhere around 160 megabits per second is what I can do with this laptop now. And so on and so forth. 802.11n is allowed to operate either on 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz bands, but running it at 2.4, as long as you have no other interfering devices, that's fine, but your neighbors are going to probably start to interfere with you. Mu MIMO, multi-user, multiple input, multiple output, was added in 802.11 AC, which came through in wave 1 or wave 2, depending on how you looked at it. It only operates in the 5 gigahertz band. Not all manufacturers implemented the same MIMO. I think you can support either 4 users or 8 users, but because nobody really implemented all of it, you may have it on the access point side, but you don't have it on the client side. Instead, 802.11ax brought in OFDMA. So what that does is OFDMA allows the transmitter and receiver to negotiate and to communicate on multiple sub-channels. So if there's an interferer in the middle of this channel bonding, they can work around it. And you can actually transmit parts. So some people some devices that don't need a lot of information, they're low data rates, they don't use the whole bandwidth to transmit. They only use a small portion of it. Other ones that are doing downloads and heavy, watching 4K TV, well, then they're going to bond to use more. So 802.11 AC Wave 2 allowed 160 megahertz channel bonding with, so it used 8 20 megahertz channels and speeds up to 1.73 gigabits per second were possible. That's the default that was on a lot of your Comcast provided routers. 802.11ax also adds the 6 gigahertz band and pushed it up to 2.4 gigabits per second with the highest modulation rate and interfaces. And again, I mentioned it also supports the sub-channel support, which can break down the channel into multiple sub-channels to allow multiple transmissions to different users at the same time. But 802.11n had transmissions to multiple users, not at the same time, unless they were on the horizontal antenna and the vertical antenna. That's the only capability it had. So why am I doing all of this to describe coverage? Well, if you know what's being used in your area, you can avoid using the same channels and reduce interference, which improves your coverage. By no doubts, Wi-Fi is an interference-limited technology. With no interference, you can operate much faster with less retransmissions. But when other users' interference raise the noise floor so that you need to exceed that by a fixed amount in order to have reliable transmissions. And how much depends on the equipment you have and which technology you're using. Some are more in interference avoidance capable in AX than they are with 802.11n. So noise floor. Noise floor is like the lowest level of what can be received on a wireless radio. Okay, so typically it's at like minus 101 dBMW, which is sometimes just called dBm. That's decibels above 1 milliwatt. So that's a huge number below 1. That's in the microwatts, way below. The typical phone that you have may work down to minus 120 dBMW. So to give you an idea of the sensitivity of a phone versus a laptop or a wireless adapter. Wireless adapters require a little bit more signal strength. Typical wireless signal strengths that you will see in your own installations might be minus 40 dBm to minus 70 dBm, where the minus 40 dBm is 30 dB better than 70 dBm, minus 70. That is a factor of 1,000. 30 dBm, it's a logarithmic thing. 30 dB is 1,000 times more signal. So it's definitely not linear. And the speed at which you can achieve is determined by the received signal over the noise floor. The closer you are to the noise floor, the slower your maximum signal is. So if somebody is interfering and raising the noise floor, guess what? You need to have more signal if you want to go a certain speed. Now I have an example with 802.11g, since those are pretty easy to decode and figure out, and there's no avoidance of the signal. If it comes in, you're going to have to deal with it. So this comes out of spec sheet of a current access point by Extreme Technology, something like a download. So if it's running 802.11g, it's on 2.4 gigahertz. It's a maximum of 54 megabits per second transmission rate. The radio can decode a 6 megabit per second signal when it's at minus 90. Okay, so that's the slowest speed you normally go with 802.11g unless you have it set to work in BG mode. If you set to work in BG mode, then you can also go all the way down to minus 94 dBm to receive a 2 megabit per second signal. That's the header that an 802.11b sends back and forth and interferes with all of the other guys that are running faster. But to be able to decode 54 megabits per second, you have to be all the way up at minus 73. If you're at minus 74, you're going to be at 48 megabit per second. You're not going to be at 54. So if your noise floor is raised up from the possible 96 dBm to minus 80, because that's the signal strength of somebody else coming into your system, you better have a signal strength of at least minus 57 dBm to operate continuously at 54 megabits per second. It's pure math. That's what happens. And 802.11n works better than G due to improved coding gains, and also because it can use some spatial transmission capabilities to try and avoid interference as well. but 802.11n MCS 0 spec is minus 89 dB, which is the 6.6 megabits per second, equivalent to that 802.11g at 6. MCS 7 is as high as a single receiver can usually go, and that's 65 megabits per second without multiple spatial streams. So how do you find interfering sources? There are a number of tools, and I didn't mention this, but you can also get a Wi-Fi analyzer on your phone as well. So you can use it for portable, and you can then check to see who else is in your area and who's on your system or trying to get on your system. And by analyzing that kind of information, you can see, like, oh, here's all my access points, and here's everybody else in the neighborhood. So you end up with something that looks like this that shows me a whole screen full of signal strength. And most of these are mine, but Netgear 23 sure isn't. Neither is, there's another couple of them here, John and Trooper, not mine. Anyhow, you can get some of this stuff on a laptop. I've used Cirrus Wi-Fi Inspector back in Win XP and Win 7 days. Wi-Fi InfoView is a NurseSoft product. There's another one that I haven't tried yet in SSIDer. And Wireshark can actually be used as well, because Wireshark does capture signal strength as well in the log, but it's actually capturing packets as well. And sometimes it won't be capturing packets for access points it doesn't know about. So here is a picture of the Wi-Fi inspector. I'm not sure whether I can magnify this much better or not. I'm going to try. But you can see that some of my access points here are at, here's one at minus 61. That wasn't in the same room with me. That was in a different room. Here's another one on a local access point in the same room that I was at. That's at minus 33. So it lost about a factor of 1,000 going through 3 walls and 5 gigahertz. So you can lose a lot of signal going through walls, and there's metal in some of these walls as well. So I'm not sure if I was right through trying to go through the metal at the time or what, but this is just like one snapshot that I took, and this thing bounces around, and you can get averages and other stuff on here as well. So let me slide this down a little bit. Oh, don't want to do that. All right, I have to unmagnify it first. Okay, but this is one tool, and it shows a lot of information. It shows what kind of encryption is being used. It shows whether it's an open or authorization required. If it knows the vendors, it'll display the vendors, but this was an old copy of Cirrus Wi-Fi Inspector, and I haven't tried the 2nd generation that exists out there now. Okay, let's go to the next screen. Okay. All right. This one is the InfoView, the one from NurseSoft. Let me try and magnify this. This is an eye chart and a half. So this one shows a whole bunch of devices here. It's not quite correct on some of these showing AC when it's with 802.11. It's at 802.11g, which is 2.4 gigahertz, because there is no such thing as GNAC. Either it's transmitting elements like it says it could support it, but in fact it can't. I think it is just misinterpreting some of these as well. Okay. There is a thing here on the right-hand side where it says elements count. If you're running the program in real time and you click on that, it actually shows the 802.11 handshake elements that describe what kind of connection you can do with this and what speeds you can use, and etc. And how to exchange keys, which key exchange program is being used. So the more elements, usually that means the more sophisticated access point, because it's got more of the goodies buried into this one. And there's a number here that show up without SSIDs that are present, but I don't know who they are without tracking down the MAC address of that particular access point to see what are you. I don't know who Honeybee Guest and Honeybee are, but they're running around on set channel 10, okay, of 802.11 of 2.4 gigahertz. So again, the AX and AC are not necessarily, the AC could be accurate on 2.4 because it can be used there. Whether it is or isn't, I don't know. The thing to notice here, though, they're at minus 80. Remember I mentioned to you about that noise floor when there's nobody around of being like minus 96? Well, this just shows me that 16 dB of it just disappeared. So, and I can even see an Xfinity Wi-Fi, which is not my own, that's showing up down there. And I don't know whether I can do this or not. Let's see if I can do this. Yes, I can. I can show you some of these other ones that I sorted this column by RSSI. This one at minus 39 at the top happens to be a interface to one of my pieces of equipment that is never accessed except one time via the setup, and it always leaves it broadcast going no matter what. So I parked it on channel 11 where I don't have too much stuff on and left it there. Then you can see some of my other access points right there that are at minus 44 to minus 65. So that's typically my signal levels in my house, but I still have other people out there that are on similar channels. But you can also see the channels that I'm operating on 11, 48, 3, and 153. And there ain't too many other people on 48. However, this Xfinity Wi-Fi down here, this 802.11n at minus 84 is on channel 44. Well, channel 44, when it's running in AX mode, overlaps channel 48. So I could possibly have a problem with that, except that I think this Xfinity Wi-Fi is across the street from me and doesn't reach to the back of my house where this other access with this other channel is in use. So a couple of these things you can use to start seeing what else is out there and get an idea and take different snapshots with a laptop in different portions of your house by a window or something, and you can get a feel for where these are coming from, which corner. This is coming from the east. This is coming from the south. This is coming from the west. I don't have anybody on the north. So anyhow, let's shrink this back down. Okay, so both of these scans I did were done today. They are, the interfering sources are at minus 79 to minus 88, but most of them are on different channels, are not interfering. My signals are on channel 3, channel 159, 163, and also channel 11, but that's on a separate access point. So I have two transmitting sources. I have one in one corner of the house. I have another one in the front of the house, which also covers part of the upstairs bedroom. It's a real old, let's see, it's probably going on 18-year-old access point that's been powered up for at least 10 years and only coming down when it gets rebooted. 802.11a and 802.11g. And I used to use this for testing, but I left it hooked up to my system and it's working fine. So why would you want to, what do you have to watch out for when you use 5 gigahertz over 2.4? Well, for the same distance, you're going to lose about 6 dB between 802.11, any topology running on 2.4 versus 5. Let's say you're using 802.11n, which works in both places, or even 802.11ax. You still have free space loss of an additional 6 dB just because you work at 5 gigahertz. If you work at 6, it's going to be even higher. So what they're really trying to explain with this is this isn't always going to go through all of the walls in your house. So you may not be able to cover your entire residence with one single access point, or maybe not even two. You might even need to use more than that to cover it and give you adequate signal in other places. Because although Wi-Fi can look around a corner, the metal corner bead in most plaster walls is, according to what the 5 gigahertz and the 2.4 gigahertz are seeing this as, consider it to be a knife edge, and it can actually diffract around the corner. So you don't have to have pure line of sight on something. It can go around the corner and then hit another area very frequently with the way the RF bounces around. Also, it will bounce off of solid metal surfaces and take off in another direction, so you don't know exactly where it might be going. But if you walk around with a signal strength analyzer, you can sometimes see some of these type of behaviors. One way to control the direction of your wireless router, if it's on an outside wall and you don't want it going to that section of the yard for any reason, you can put a reflector behind it. And if you put a reflector, it happens to be positioned pretty close to the focal point of the parabola, you can focus the energy to go in the other direction. So I did this long time ago from an old presentation. I did this with a USB attached Wi-Fi adapter, stuck it through this piece of aluminum that was bent in the rough shape of a parabola, and could demonstrate how I could increase or decrease the signal strength by aiming at the access point I wanted to reference. And I had done the same thing at home for a while by putting an old, this is an old WRT 53, I think, router, and put the antenna. It looks like it's installed backwards because it's got the ports in the front. But that was just because the antenna that was on it, which was a gain antenna, could be placed pretty close to the focal point of the parabola and force the connection to go in a particular direction. That way, front to back, I would definitely increase by almost 10 dB. So by measuring the setup, and this is what I currently use, is my WRT 1900. There are multiple antennas here. Some of them, well, they'll transmit and go one place, but come stay there. But the other antennas can focus and transmit to where I'm in this room. I'm about 54 feet away from that router right now. And I'm going through at least one wall, or going around the edge of a wall. Could be either, because there's a door opening, but it's not line of sight with the router. And it's got to go around a TV set as well. But I'm able to connect at 144 megabits per second or greater to this particular laptop, which is doing 2x2, and that router is doing 4x4 spatial stream transmitters and receivers.
Can that actually stop the signal from going in the other direction, like block the neighbors from seeing it?
It doesn't do it completely, but it sure cuts down a lot of it. Because what it can do is it can go out the front where it's focusing to, hit something metal, and then bounce right back. So if you don't have any metal in front of your Wi-Fi, it's going to basically cut off almost all the signal, not completely, but it'll be down by between 10 and 20 dB. So it's not going to pick up as well, and because it can actually go around the edge of that metal, because the way I had the metal curved, that's a knife edge. It can diffract around the edge, so it can do some to the side. It's not a perfect dish. A perfect dish for 2.4 megahertz would probably be about a meter. So yeah, it would have to be pretty good size. Actually, the old Dish Network dishes could be used for that. So if you had an old Dish Network dish and you didn't mind having this thing displayed in your house, you could put your antenna at the focal point of that and use it to bounce. It works better at 5 gigahertz than it does at 2.4 though. Okay, you can use mesh routers. They take out some of the guesswork, but unless they have been configured specifically with a separate backbone method of communication to improve throughput, they're going to receive and then transmit a packet. Whenever you receive a packet and then transmit a packet, and you're using the same frequency, you're going to possibly cause collisions. That's what mesh tries to avoid, but it's not completely foolproof. And then your device itself is maybe not mesh, a mesh client, so it doesn't understand some of these things as well as it should, because it can't provide mesh services for something else nearby. So if you had a phone and a laptop, and the laptop received the message, the packet for the phone, he could retransmit it to the phone, so the phone doesn't have to struggle with it. But if the client is not a mesh client, it won't do that. Not too many people have mesh clients. The other thing is you have to position your mesh devices such that they have adequate signal to receive and transmit to the host router without having to retransmit. Anytime you start to get into retransmission, you have problems. So it would be best for using a mesh on a pretty much clear channel if you can get it, and make the communication that way. Using additional access points at reduced power that you can use to affect coverage on different floors or areas where it's blocked by metal and walls can work really well. Use a wired connection to the access point, or you can use a wireless router that you connect into the downstream port, the back end of the router, so to speak, where you used to plug in everybody else. And then you disable DHCP on the router as well, because you don't want him supplying new DHCP addresses that don't make sense to the rest of the network or interfere with the rest of the network. And you can then add coverage to other areas to support legacy devices such as 802.11b on their own channel, and then they won't bother the other things that are trying to transmit faster on 2.4. And if you use like a gigabit Ethernet support, you can go 328 feet, 100 meters or 95 meters approximately, and with wired connections. So, and the wired connections don't end up having to do retransmits. Those are pretty solid. So you have a guaranteed 1 gigabit path between those two. They don't have to worry about retransmitting, so it works well. Okay. And this is the list of my references. So if you want to look at any one of these things, I can show you one of these right now, since I'm at the end of my presentation. I will change my share here. And let's see. All right. I got to go back into sharing. All right. So we want to go to this share. All right. Okay, good. So here's list of WLAN channel. If you ever see 802.11ah, I'll just notice the US frequencies. There are some channels that are way down below 1 gigahertz. Well, way down below 1 gigahertz, above most UHF TV in these bands. And what that allows is longer distance communication for slower devices. Typically, they're for IoT type devices. Okay. Let's get rid of that right there. 2.4 shows me all of the channels, and basically you can see here 12, 13, and 14 are not to be used by North America. For the most part, the US and Canada are pretty much the same, but there are differences up in the 5 gigahertz band, what is allowed and what's not allowed. So if I'm in the rest of the world, I might have channels 1 through 13 like in Israel, but in Israel, they don't allow any 5 gigahertz. Why? Because it might interfere with Patriot missile batteries, which are very important to have there. And I'd hate to be running a 5 gigahertz access point and then find out a Patriot missile has just decided to determine I am the track on jam target. In some places of the world, and I think this is mostly in Japan, there is an amateur band that's down below 4 gigahertz. And there's a citizens broadband radio service band. As long as you don't incur interference with it, some of those channels can be used, but you're not going to find a lot of equipment that'll allow you to use that. Most of that would be for public safety. Here's the 5 gigahertz band, and you'll notice all of these channels up till you get to 32 are only for other areas of the world. They're not for, usually, and I can't expand it, but if you go over to the side, you'll find that some of those are Japanese channels and such. But here's the column for the US right here. So US, here's the 32, 34. They are indoor, and you must have transmitter power control, TPC. 36 through 48 are the original ones that were there. 36, 40, 44, and 48 were originally laid out. And they were used for the original low power indoor 5 gigahertz channels. Since then, they've added these other channels, 50, and you notice that they have this little thing here that must have transmitter power control and DFS, basically radar avoidance. So all of these ones that they brought in called the mid-band channels were radar avoidance. And then there's a big hunk of the band that still hasn't been accessed because it's reserved for other users of the band. And then so from 68, then we skip to 96, and you have more radar avoidance channels all the way up to 149. Yeah, 149. This is the original high power channel, UNI3, that basic Uni 3, which was the ones that could run 1 watt EIRP, as long as it was outside. So you may have had some of these other technologies that was sharing these channels using this. So you could run into some interference from them. However, for the most part, they can be used indoors and lower power as well. And they used to only go up to 163, no, 165, I think it was. And then you see these other ones that come through and say indoors, indoor, indoor, indoor. And then there's another section that's not being used or not allowed to be used in the US. But right next to us is the Canadian, and there's some here that say no. No, 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 no. And then you have the 6 gigahertz channels on the other side of all this, all the footnotes here. There are the 6 gigahertz channel. Low power indoors, what those, VLP is very low power. So Canada is more particular on some of these things that you have to be able to cut down the power levels as well if you're running in the 6 gigahertz band. But there's a lot of channels up in 6 gigahertz that can be used. However, you got to make sure that your equipment can run there. You may have to be able to get a new router, but now what do you do with that laptop that doesn't support it yet? Buy a new laptop? That's one way of doing it. But there are a number of channels that are standard and low power indoors. And there's a lot of them. And if you see here, see this 160 number? That's where it shows you where the channels can be gathered into 160 as consistent. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bands equivalent to the 5 gigahertz band. So there's a lot of room. I suspect you're not going to see a lot of interference on 6 gigahertz for a while. But you start to run into other problems when you start running above 5 gigahertz and into 6, because the high end of this 6 is actually into 7 territory, okay? At 7 gigahertz is where you start to run into issues with rain. If it's raining outside, it will absorb the signal, because 7 gigahertz is one of those areas that you have to be above 7 gigahertz. You have to watch out for effects of rain on your link. Below that, you can pretty much ignore rain with impunity. But above that, that's the threshold that most microwave engineers said, oh, rain fade. We better account for it and make sure we have enough link budget to handle it. And link budget is where you go and you calculate that path loss and you make sure you're above the horizon when you're trying to do a far distance. How high does this tower need to be, and how much power do I need to run, and how much directionality can I accommodate with antennas? The other thing you might find is you have more power with some of the Wi-Fi 6 implementations that might actually use things like beam steering. Concept of doing beam steering is to electronically phase the signal going to multiple antennas so as to control the direction at which most of the power of the transmission is directed. So some of these newer access points will be able to figure out where it sees you coming from and tries to transmit back to where it thinks you are. But we're not quite there yet. And that's pretty much what my presentation was today. Any questions? Sure, you would have one, Tim, no?
No, hang on. Part of it was over my head, but part of it I understood quite a bit.
Well, you can go back and look at it. That's why I sent out and to give you all the references. You can read the references too. There's a lot of stuff out there. And you have a mesh deployment, right?
No, I don't.
I thought you did. Okay.
No, I use multiple routers to spread the signal out.
Okay, yeah, as long as they can be wired, then you don't have to have line of sight and retransmit. I used to have or set up some of my wireless devices where to give coverage at 2.4, we connected the backhaul through 5.8. So it was a tri-radio. There was 3 radios inside of this thing. You could use one of the radios on the 5.8 gigahertz to be the backhaul back to the main one, and that was solely for the backhaul. And then the coverage was 2.4 because the devices we were using were all 2.4 gigahertz devices. You could do things like that as long as you have line of sight. We did the, we can even use some of these access points purely as like a poor man's microwave backhaul by using it to backhaul from one device to the other. And we had a setup between the main building at Sears and the auto center that was to be a Sears in Schaumburg. And I had to go in there and correct some of the configurations on that to make it work. Interesting time. But that gave coverage for all of the wired network inside the auto center. All went through this wireless link at 5.8 gig to its brother on the other side of the building using basically mesh antennas. So they were directional. Oh, let's do some of this. Too much talking. Okay, any other questions?
What is this X10 that Xfinity's advertising?
It's just a marketing term. It has nothing to do with 10 gig.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, they might possibly use 10 gig fiber on their own internal backbone, but we don't know what they use. And sometimes it doesn't work, just like evidence when I just got dropped out. And I couldn't connect to Zoom, and I'm sure it was some Comcast router taking issue with my presentation. But it's more marketing than anything else. There is some things you can do. There are standards that are still in a state of flux. You can use hard copper wire if it's like Cat 7 or Cat 8 cable that can go in excess of 1 gigabit per second over copper. The only question is how much distance can you support with it, and it depends on the devices. I mean, I saw an advertisement for a Netgear. Was it Netgear? Might have been Netgear. It might have been some other manufacturer. It was a switch that they had. It was a 10 gigabit switch, but all of the places where you would plug Ethernet cables in were little slots for what's called small form factor transceivers that plug in, and then you have fiber optic that goes into those. So yes, it was a 10 gig switch, but it had all the fiber connections to connect to the switch. And that expected you to run fiber, through your entire house or wherever you wanted to run high-speed network. It's all a matter of proportions, though. If you are connected on a standard Comcast plan, oh, you might have 4 or 5 or 600 megabit per second downloads, but they're still limiting you to 12 megabit upload. So
Yep.
unless you have to get more than the 12 up, does it really make sense to run 2.3 down if I can't communicate up fast enough? Or I watch how long it takes me to upload that video I just took of the sandhill crane that walks in my backyard? I can see how long it takes. That was right next to the router.
Well, if you need a faster upstream, of course, you're going to be using FiOS.
Yes, if you have it available. I don't happen to have it available in my neighborhood. Not likely with the sparse connections in my neighborhood, unless there's a competitor to Comcast that wants to lay their own fiber optic.
Yeah, well, in my area, we've got Verizon all over the place.
Yeah, because you're East Coast, and that's where Verizon's big. Maybe if they start running their fiber optic system to their cell sites and then also want to connect up various neighborhoods, I could see that coming to pass.
Well, what they're going to concentrate on, everybody's concentrating on fixed 5G wireless.
Yeah, and the fixed 5G wireless is fine until you figure out how is that 5G wireless connecting to his brother? Is he connecting through a microwave backhaul, or is he connecting through fiber optic? If he's going through fiber optic, he's better off until somebody cuts it.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the details are about it. Just it's supposed to be something that'll more quickly bring more service to more people.
Yeah, I mean, I've used fiber optics when I used to work at Motorola. Some of our equipment rooms were tied together with fiber optic interfaces to go to the different floors and talk to the controllers on a per floor basis rather than running Ethernet cable up to it. They ran fiber to those and then split it out from there. But it's kind of touchy. You got to be real careful with fiber optic. It does not bend at all. You have a radius to bend, and if you exceed that radius, you've just broken the fiber.
Yeah, what I was talking about was the fixed wireless 5G.
I understand.
That's very quick. That's very quick to roll out. But as you say, there are different ways of communicating between the neighborhood antennas.
Right. And then the question is, what frequencies are they going to be using to communicate? Because some of those frequencies are 24 and 60 gigahertz.
Yep.
Guess what, folks? Remember that thing I told earlier about rain? Snow also counts. So all of a sudden, like, I can't communicate. Well, that used to be the typical problem with CDMA, was if you were in a overpopulated CDMA site, the CDMA site coverage would breathe depending on the number of users. So more users, it shrinks. More users, it shrinks. And if you were outside the place where it just shrunk, it just dropped your call. Now, granted, they're going to try and do more with 5G fixed and more power to them, do it all wirelessly, but there's still going to be a point where if you have an option for a cheap fiber optic cable to be put into your neighborhood and a feedback to it, take it. You know, that's going to be fast. It's going to be reliable until somebody cuts the fiber, and then it's going to take longer to fix. The earwigs will get it. And in some respects, Comcast is okay, and depends on who in your neighborhood is already committed to certain services, depending on whether it affects you or not. Sometimes your upload speed can be affected by somebody else who's been granted the full gigabit upload speed. And it depends on whether they go beyond DOCSIS 3.1 modems as well to be able to channel bond upstreams even more than that they're currently using. I've seen too many issues with just the normal cable and digital cable when I start seeing pixelation on some channels that I normally don't get pixelation. And if I throw my decoder into diagnostic mode so I can see what channels they're using, then I can get a feel for, oh, you guys are using 330 megahertz or you're using 180 megahertz. Guess what? There is other interfering sources that can leak into the cable then. And the ones that are usually at 120 are picking up every aircraft that comes through when they're directed overhead. But that's what they do, is when they have too many complaints of interfering, they'll reprogram the channel that it's on to be using a different channel, then some other channel will get the errors. Hopefully it's one that I don't use. But they're getting their speeds up, but the only way they can advertise their, with the 2 gig speed or something, it's not coming out of the cable modem at that speed. The cable modem and the router have to be one and the same because they need to transmit from the one side to the other faster than 1 gigabit. Now my cable modem can support going faster, but only over 2 physical Ethernet cables, and then I would have to find a router that can support 2 gigabit Ethernet coming in and be able to use it for a loading mechanism to split between the two. I don't have that, so those routers are a little bit out of my price range because they usually are very expensive Cisco routers.
I'm not sure what everybody needs all this speed or bandwidth for anyway, unless you have a very large family or a lot of gaming going on.
It's a lot of gaming. It's the VR. If you have a visual thing and you're playing games, that might have to have up to 10 gigabits, as I recall reading.
I can't see anything that needs 10 gigabits VR bandwidth requirements. Because most of those games, for the most part, you got to download the game first, and that may be 100 gig just for the game itself.
Right.
And then, VR 2.35 gigahertz or above for VR video, 100 times higher than the data rate for current high definition video streaming. Well, they'll be the only people that need that bandwidth. The rest of us, however, can get by with, that's right, I channel bond 2 channel. You know, that's my extravagance. With the 2 channels, I could possibly hit 300 megabits per second. That's going to be pretty fast. And if I want faster, plug into one of my gigabit connections, and my 400 guaranteed speed from Comcast turns out to be 472. Just happens to go faster on a wired connection. There's no retransmit, no hiccups, no nothing, just smoke. And the upload is 12.08.
I just ran it on mine. I've got it since I hooked up, direct here. 469 megabits per second.
You got a quad core better, and it will usually show you those kinds of numbers. If you had a dual core, you wouldn't get that high.
I got an i5 on this.
Yeah.
This is a Windows 11 computer I just got last November.
I mean, even at the speeds though approaching over 1 gigabit per second, the adapters and the interface to the Windows operating system start to become a factor where you basically could be ending up using one of your multi-cores just for communicating to the internet. Because it could consume as much as a full core just to transmit at those speeds. Due to the programming requirements, the data transfer requirements. I mean, some of it can be alleviated by DMA use in the controller, but not everyone implements a DMA controller right, and they end up having to have the processor manipulate multiple bytes back and forth. Okay, other questions? Sid, go ahead, unmute.
Yep, got it. There was just a news thing out from Xfinity that they have upped speeds at 20 million users at no additional charge. And they've been doing that over the years. They've been bumping people. They said to go look in your portal to see what your current speed is.
Mm-hmm.
I checked. My current is 800 down and 20 up. And I just did a speed test and I actually got 23 up.
Well, I look at the same, and it's all controlled by what do they put into your modem, because you have to power cycle your modem to get those new speeds, and those are artificial limits inside your modem that they have implemented. It's not a physical restriction of you being able to use it. The modem that we have at my church, they kicked it up from 160 to 250, and I can get 300 down, but its up speed is 24 because it's a business. And like I said, business accounts, they give more upstream to than they normally do for residential users. I wouldn't mind having a better load speed, because there are a couple times where it would make sense to be able to do that. Why would this be an effect on anyone that's listening here? Well, if you try and back up to the cloud and your upload speed is only 12 megabits per second, do the math. I'm going to back up my 200 gigabyte database here, and I'm going to put it in the cloud. How long will it take? It's going to take a while. At 12 megabits per second, it's going to take a while. Now, granted, if you're not doing anything for a day and a half, that's great.
Oh, forget about that piddling capacity. I just got an offer for Seagate. Seagate has a new self-healing array. It's 160 16 terabyte drives, 2.1 petabytes of storage in it. It's available at CDW for $56,000.
Yeah.
Has it got wheels? Do you park it in your garage?
No,
Does it
but
heat-
it's
does it
really
heat the
cool
garage?
when it rolls open and a top rises, exposing the 160 hot swappable drives. It also weighs 298 pounds.
For some houses, you would have to reinforce your beams.
Yeah, that's a lot of weight in a given area. Although 16 inches on center, you're probably okay. But if you got 2x8s underneath there, I would seriously consider before moving it across it. Especially if you're walking next to it at the same time.
Yeah.
They also talk about keeping it cool, but I love this self-healing. They basically say 5 drives can simultaneously fail and it won't burp at it.
Well, that's good.
In various kinds of arrays, you could have a drive fail, you swap another drive in, and you'll get back everything.
Right, because it'll go ahead and start healing that one drive that just got replaced internally at drive speed. So does it come with water? Does it come with hose connections so you can water cool it?
No, but this one, as I said, 5 drives can fail simultaneously and it'll still keep going.
How many drives are in this configuration?
160.
I would hope it handles more than 5.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, but
5 at the same time, but
the probability of more than 5 dying at a time is pretty small, you would think.
That depends on how much heat it's generating.
And these are Seagate drives.
Yeah, well, and they do have built-in redundant power supplies, redundant Ethernet built in it.
Yeah.
eSATA built in it. Cool. As I said, when it opens, there are videos of it on YouTube. And when it opens, it slides out and lifts at an angle to expose the drives. It's really cool looking stuff.
I mean, I used to work on systems that had non-fault processors. And see, the thing is with the disk drive, as long as the disk drives are controlled by some sort of controller above them, and it must have a multi-port controller above it that is redundant as well. Because if the controller fails, it's going to take out a lot more than 5 drives. And the question is, because I don't think there are too many SATA drives which are multi-ported. I mean, some of the controllers I've seen didn't have dual-ported drives. They had a controller that had multiple ports on it, and it could talk to the disk drives independently. So the disk drives were all tied into the controller, and then the controller itself had ports to multiple devices, and that's how you got some of the fault tolerance.
Yeah, but
The
my question is, who's got all that much data? I mean,
It's not
petabytes?
It's not that hard.
Yeah, it's somebody who's stealing all of our credentials and medical files. He's got to put it somewhere.
Or crypto mining, or maybe they're crypto mining.
Yeah.
Just think how many movies you could save.
even after you've taken every single movie that's in digital content and put it on there, you still probably could take the Library of Congress and throw in probably every computer program ever written.
Do us, yeah, no, just do a search on the amount of data generated on the internet every day. The number is boggling. Somebody asked about it in the last APCU meeting, so I looked it up, and the numbers are boggling, just how much data is generated.
I think Sanford wants to kick in something.
Sure,
There
go
is
ahead,
a-
Sanford.
There's a full sky telescope that's going to be coming online later on this year out in Hawaii. If I got my place correct. No, I did. I'm sorry. This is in Chile.
Chile.
And that one is going to be using, and I don't remember how, I think it was 120 some odd gigabit sensor or something. It's astronomically huge, and how much data it's going to be consuming in one night. It's going to take them 3 days to process it, to
Right.
save.
How long do they scan? How long does it take to make one scan of 120 gigabyte sensor?
I don't, I might be wrong in the sensor, how many gigabytes it is. I'll have to look it up. I was just thinking about it because I read about it, and this thing is just massive, and how much data it's going to be consuming. But it does large swaths of the sky all at once, and they could do it, and it's going to be incredible. So let me do it while I'm thinking about it. I'll go look it up real quick, okay?
Yeah, because it's got to do it. It'll do a snapshot of what it can see, and then it's got to take time to scan it and transfer it, unless it's a dual layer. Yeah, and it could swap to another one. That's not the 3200 megapixel camera, is it? No, that's an old.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. VistaESO.org. All right. Is that? Oh, that's visible in infrared survey telescope.
Sid, you're creating echo feedback.
Well, that's because somebody's unmuted.
That's it.
Yep. Okay. No, it doesn't say. I looked. Either that or I move closer. Maybe it's the microphone on the camera. Nope, I don't think so. So he's looking it up. They probably don't tell you yet. It'll be enough.
Ooh, a petabyte can hold 11,000 4K movies.
That's all.
Yeah,
Good thing there isn't that many of them made yet.
4,000 digital photos every day for the rest of your life.
That's a lot.
The Library of Congress actually now contains over 20 petabytes.
That's a lot.
By the way, are you going to share your slides?
I already did. It should be in the chat.
It's
What?
not. You probably sent it to a person instead of to everyone.
No, I sent it to everyone, but remember, I power cycled here at least once, and it's still
Yeah,
in
but I
there.
didn't go off.
Yeah,
The only
okay.
thing I see is a message from Bob in chat.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was about
that's
something
correct.
much earlier.
Yeah, that's correct. The only Bob's is out there. Yours isn't.
Yeah.
Oh, it says your file is already in the, it's in the compose box. Sorry, my fault.
Compose.
Yeah, I thought I had
There we
clicked it
have it.
already, and I was thinking, oh, why isn't it out there? Okay,
Okay, we've got it.
yeah, it's been there since I power cycled.
Okay.
Here, let's do this. Share. This is who I had visiting today.
Yeah.
Sandhill Crane.
Oh, wonderful.
This is first time in about 4 or 5 years that I've had one in my yard. More than 4 or 5 years. 2014, I think. Yeah, somewhere's around there. I've got a picture. I don't have a video of them, but I have a picture of them from back then that shows the three of them walking across my driveway in the front yard. I didn't have my camera ready to catch the Cooper's hawk that flew through either. But he was looking for something and came close to the window.
We get a lot of Cooper's hawks around my area.
I have one that was parked in the tree across the street from me, and it's been there for a couple days on and off when I would go out and get the paper, and I'd hear a and I would go back to it, and then it would fly over to one of my trees looking for the other bird, and then you were not a Cooper's hawk, you fool! I'm out of here. Fool, out of here. I usually can mimic a lot of the hawks, and if a Cooper's hawk is in the area and you make it sound like a red-tailed hawk, they scoot. Yes, let's see. New telescope.
I was digging, I couldn't find it because it was something that came through me the other day and I read about it. And I kind of dismissed it. So back to the presentation, if you will. Ooh, am I echoing?
Yes,
Yeah, but it's somebody else who's picking it up.
I think it's Sid.
No.
Somebody's got a speaker and a microphone.
All right. Anyways, so in my house setup, I have two routers that are running, and I use one as my primary and the other set up in a mesh mode. However, I backhaul across an RJ45. I am wondering, would I be better off to set up that second device because it's not line of sight? The second router, set it up as being an access point instead of doing a mesh?
It'd probably be better off doing it not as a mesh, but as a separate access point. And you could use the same SSID, but put it on a different channel. Because on mesh, it's going to be on the same channel, because that's how meshes work.
Okay,
And you're going to have some collisions at the common signal strength point between the two routers, depending if they're able to see each other, even have the signal reach to the same point. So you might have a no man's land that might be some number of feet wide where you're in the middle and you get excessive collisions and such like that. Sometimes the mesh can handle some of that by doing some timing exchange, but I don't know if that's in commercial gear or only in residential type of stuff. So putting it as a separate access point on a different channel, same SSID is usually the best, non-interfering channel.
okay.
And then you can go to town with it.
And then it was also suggested that I change my IP address instead of being the standard 192.168.1.1, go to something like 192.168.60.1.
You could, it doesn't make any difference, but depends on how much addresses you think you need. Are you extending because the normal Class C address only allows for 253 devices.
Okay, I'm not exceeding that.
Okay, if you're going to do what's called super netting, where you took two things and put them together like 60 and 61 and making a larger subnet mask and be able to handle more devices, you could do that, because anything on the 192.168 subnet is ignored by the rest of the internet.
Okay,
That's only your thing. You could do the same thing on the 72 net. Was it 172.70? Well, no, 172.10. There's a subnet down there as well. You could use in the Class B range if you needed even more. That's the typical one that comes out the back of a UMA device. So if you plug into the downstream port on an UMA, you'll get a 172.10. something address.
okay.
But no, I've used that. And then if you want to put in a third or a fourth access point in other places, it's relatively simple. You just duplicate the setup and pick new channels and put it in a different spot. I would suggest that you use different SSIDs between 2.4 and 5, so you can control the pecking order of how your device wants to find those SSIDs, only using the 2.4 when it can't get there any other way.
Oh, looks like Bob found it. Found the reference.
It was discussed in one of our local Massachusetts technology user groups, so I had some idea what I was looking for.
Oh, it's even spelled in the European fashions. 12-story with an E.
It depends on where you find the reference.
Yes. Well, it's got enough mirrors in there. Don't break any of them. Dang. Petapixel?
Yeah, does it tell you how many pixels it is?
Petapixels.
Petapixels. Okay,
That's a
so
lot.
yeah. So that goes back to who needs one this big? They do, but I'm sure theirs is more custom.
There are things that it will be able to observe better than the James Webb Space Telescope.
Right.
Namely, one very important thing, asteroids.
Right.
You want to look for anything that moves between the first frame and the second frame and figure out if it's coming toward us or away from us.
That's one thing.
Yeah, that's one of the problems that they run into, is being able to scan enough of the sky simultaneously. That's something that they really haven't been able to do much of. Granted, it's in the southern hemisphere, so it's not going to be able to see anything coming straight down at the North Pole.
True. Yeah, it has a completely different purpose from James Webb. James Webb cannot, the things it does cannot be done from Earth because it's looking in the far infrared.
Yeah.
And that's so that they can see the early universe and figure out how galaxies first started to form.
Yeah, and then they're going to find out that when they finally have magnified and magnified and magnified, they're going to see another James Webb telescope looking right back at it.
Not from the length of time back they're looking.
Yeah, I remember I don't remember which particular sci-fi story this one ancestor, but
Yeah.
Our universe really wasn't as big as we think it is. It only goes out to like about Jupiter, and it's a big ball, and then it's all dummied up for us.
Well, these days they're talking about multiverses, so we could have something right next door to us and we don't even know it.
True. Yeah, it could be. It could be a multiverse in the garage next door.
There could be a portal.
Yeah, could be. No, that's the whole multiverse is that garage.
Yeah, there are some that are so small they're not even detectable. They're not even visible to our instruments. Anyway.
Cool.
Not terribly important.
We'll do a save chat. Good. Thank you very much. Okay. Any other thoughts of what else you'd like to have for future meetings? Any guesses? Any bleeding desires that you just can't wait to get a hold of? If it requires Windows 12, I don't have it yet.
Neither do I.
I've heard rumors about it though.
Oh, I've heard all kinds of rumors for 12. It's like, give me a break. But last I remember, they might release 12 next year sometime.
Now the question remains, if they go to 12, are they skipping 13?
Who knows?
There are some reasons why people don't have 13th floors on some buildings.
Right. Hey, but it's Microsoft, so they may not care.
May not. Okay.
I see they've come out with this Chat GPT 4 now.
Yes, it's already out.
Yeah.
ChatGPT-4.
That was an earlier discussion. Wayne, have you played with, who here in the group has used or played with ChatGPT? Okay. I found it to be very advantageous.
I've had mixed review.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we've had some good luck. You and I worked on something together, but
Right.
at the same time too, I've tried some things that so far I haven't figured out if I'm making a mistake or it's just not working right.
That
I
that
found,
brings
I
up,
found,
sorry, go ahead, Wayne.
I found that, it's pretty good at some of the engineering things.
Oh,
Cause I asked it some engineering things and it was right on the money.
on the February tips and tricks SIG, we actually did a hands-on on ChatGPT.
Right.
I would encourage everybody here, if you haven't tried ChatGPT or if you're interested, go and watch the YouTube video on the Chicago Computer Society's page and go watch the video from February, and it'll give you a hands-on approach of how we used it and what we did with it.
Yeah, it's the TNT SIG.
Right.
I used tried to do some things with it, but what I found is it doesn't necessarily have much information beyond someplace where I already knew where to go. For instance, I was searching some of the old HP calculators, and it just takes you to the HP museum and tries to repeat the stuff that's on there. So it doesn't have a broad, in a lot of ways, it doesn't have a broad background of information.
It depends on how much information, old stuff has been digitalized to go
Right.
on the internet for access. If you get old enough, it's not there. It's only in paper or books. And because of that, it has no way of accumulating that knowledge and using it. And Sid, you've got one hell of a feedback into this Zoom meeting.
Yeah, Sid, I think you have both a microphone and a speaker going.
Well, they're sort of both built in the machine. You're correct. I thought I had remuted myself and I forgot.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway. Whoops. So Ed, if you're trying to talk, you're muted.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm muted, yes. I was just trying to look and see where I gotta find the stuff on the CCS site to pull out some of those downloads, or is that on the YouTube channel?
YouTube channel,
Yeah,
look up the Chicago Computer Society, click that, and go to playlist. It breaks out the groups. Go to TNT SIG, view the view list, the playlist, and then you look for the February 2023 video.
yeah, okay. All right, so then I used, yes, good. Playlists, tips and tricks. Okay, found it. Oh, careful here, Ed. Does it allow a download?
You probably have to use a third party. I don't think it allows you to do it unless you are a.
Yeah. I'm just looking to see whether or not, nope. I'll have to stream it to my TV or something like that. Okay.
I have a downloader that can download YouTube videos.
I have one too somewhere. I just have to remember which one I used last and does it still work? And sometimes that's easier, but
I think mine's the one from Mini Tool.
Mini Tool? Okay.
Yeah.
I use 4K video downloader,
That'll work.
and it's a free program. It works just great.
Yeah, and the one from Minitool is also a free program,
Okay,
so you can take your pick.
Okay, good. All right. Well, now you guys have updated on all this stuff. I have to save chat again.
Oh,
Otherwise, I will forget and
it
save
should
the
save
chat.
it automatically.
It should save it, but not always. I found that some things don't quite always save depending on the version of Zoom. Because I tried to save some stuff and I went back to look at it, like it was my last save and it didn't have the stuff before that. Like, what did you do? So, yes, hopefully it saved it and it's appended to it. But no guarantee. I would have hoped that you had to do one save and then when you shut down, it updates it with the final save and then we're all done or finished. But no.
sometimes that does work.
You don't want that smart. You wouldn't want that smart. There's actually settings on the accounts where you can where you can't copy paste it, chat stuff. You can't save chat stuff. Depending on the settings, it controls whether you can do that.
APCUG uses that feature quite a bit to say that at certain times during the presentation, you cannot use the chat because they went to live Q&A. On the other hand, during a regular presentation, you can do the chat, but you are muted and you're not supposed to be able to unmute.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you can also set chat so it can only go to the hosts and not to everyone. You can
Oh,
do that
Yeah,
as well.
that's when you have a very large meeting, you don't want everyone filling stuff. So the host and then can prune it out and then decide what goes to the rest of the people.
Yeah, APCUG takes the approach that for certain things, they have 4 or 5 co-hosts and you send certain chats to certain co-hosts ask questions for you, make statements, observations, or if you got a problem with Zoom, one of the other co-hosts handles your Zoom questions and problems, etc.
Cool. All right.
Then there's also the difference between Zoom meeting and Zoom webinar.
Yes. A webinar is one person usually speaking, doing the presentation, and everybody's muted, and you use the chat to ask your questions or comments, etc. And then in a Q&A, somebody reads off the questions or comments, and any responses verbal.
Yeah. Less dynamic, but no real chance of feedback.
Right, it's more restricted on a webinar, and usually they're very, very large. But APCUG sometimes, in fact, recently they had something like 150 people or more, but their license is only for 100, so the overflow goes into YouTube.
Oh. How unique.
The
Well,
the
times they're under 100.
engineers of Zoom have a regular chat. They do a regular Zoom as a webinar, and they usually have 1,500 to 2,000 people on.
Right, that's where you absolutely have to have the webinar feature.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you won't get anything out of the entire webinar because it'll be too many people trying to interact at the same time verbally.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's why APCUG, even when they're under 100 people, and that they mute everybody when they start the meeting so that nobody ends up usually affecting the presentation by walking over the speaker.
Right.
Yep.
So there's pluses and minuses. That's also where they use co-hosts a lot, and really we should adapt having at least one co-host per meeting, that in case you have problems like Ed had.
Yep.
And to offload things, so that instead of having to admit all the people into the meeting, the co-host does.
Yeah, we do that at our church. One person will be running that, and another person could be doing all the admissions and such.
Yeah, there's some pluses and minuses that can be taken advantage of. We just don't bother with it because it adds a extra level of complexity, and we don't get enough volunteers. That's a fact.
You've been volunteered. Okay, cool. All right. So it looks like we're a little past the end point of the meeting. Sorry for the interruption we had in the middle, but I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here. So it'll automatically generating it.